interesting to use that term, Renaissance, because we had a European Renaissance, and there's, in a certain sense, an Islamic Renaissance, or reaching for, if I'm not correct. I mean, it seems to me reaching for an Islamic Renaissance, and some people in the West or the rest of the world are worried about that possibility of a Renaissance or a birth or strength beginning to develop among the Islamic countries.
Because it is perceived that it will be antithetical to democracy and modernity.
Yeah, the modernity. Yeah.
So, of course, quite naturally, Western scholars and analysts would say, well, we're apprehensive about this whole project.
Right.
We don't feel that it's going to take us into the 21st century.
Right.
And there are a lot of nuances connected with that. Open markets, the global economy, and things of that sort.
Yeah, the gap just went in. Hello, good evening and welcome very, very much to Conversations, where I'm very, very pleased to welcome three gentlemen that can talk about Islam in some specific terms and in perhaps some general terms, and perhaps try to set the record a little bit straight in terms of the way we understand that here, Islam in this country. And if I may, on my far left, we have Amir AlIslam, who is with the Medgar Evers College and has come in, and Amir AlIslam, welcome very, very much to Conversation.
Thank you very much.
And on in the media, we have Dr. Muhammed Agwa. He's a PhD, and he's the Imam and Director of the, the New York
Islamic Cultural Center.
Islamic Cultural Center, and he's also, as it were, I think, connected with the Al-Azhar University in Cairo.
Yeah.
And welcome to Conversation, and to New York, if I may. You've
Thank
been
you
here
so
a
much.
relatively brief time.
Thank you.
And on my immediate left is Fathy Hegazy, who is he's with the Islamic and World Peace Association. And gentlemen, all three, welcome very, very much to Conversation.
Thank you so much.
We're gathered here on December 1, and we're wanting to talk about a number of things, and one of which, and I'm not sure who wants to pick it up, but in terms of the misunderstanding that is so manifest and understood by you gentlemen who understand Islam, by the popular and broad culture of the United States, the misunderstanding of Islam, is there a principal aspect of that misunderstanding that you think it's important that we, here in the time that we have, might address? What is the principal misconception, the most dangerous and wrong or misconception that, in your view, the American people at large have about the world of Islam, as you understand it? There's a lot of different things you could take, but...
I mean, from my point of view, is the misunderstanding about Islam in American society, perhaps is go back years before that the people already immigrate from Europe to come here, because this misunderstanding or this anti-Islam existed long time ago during the power of the Roman Empire. And when Islam came just the first time, as a message from the Prophet Muhammad Salem, from this time, during this time, the Roman Empire was already on his full power. But after a while, what happened? It was the first enemy to attack was Islam. And this continues until today. But it could be, first of all, it is because of misunderstanding of the message itself. And it could be for another reason, of prejudice reason, because Roman Empire usually is Europe, and Islam starts in the Middle East.
Also, it was after the Roman Empire largely fell, in a certain sense, that Islam emerged after the 6th, 7th century.
Yes.
And Rome was pretty much, but that's that conflict with the West and Islam is one that goes back and has deep historical roots.
As deep. And if you go back also more than that, we can, by history, everyone knows, and people are talking about now about Abraham. And who is Abraham really? He, according to what we hear right now, he is the father of the three religion. But what happened, if you go step by step to what the Torah said about the coming prophet, according to on the word and the mouth of Moses. And later on, the same thing happened by Jesus. Jesus himself is accepted for the Muslim as the Messiah, which is, we don't have nothing that means against any, we are not anti-Christian or anti-Christ, because already Jesus is one of the prophets of Islam.
Well, that's one good thing for Americans to understand, is that the Islam is in the tradition, or they're of the book,
Yes.
and that they accept. And maybe probably a lot of Americans don't understand that Islam is one of the main monotheistic religions, which is in keeping with Judaism and Christianity, and these are a special kind of, there's a connection between them. We were talking earlier about how do you define the West and the East. But yes, go ahead, Imam.
Yes. تفضل خلاص.
That means, just to give you a small point, that Islam is not a new religion. It is the same religion was given to all previous prophets, which the meaning itself, it is submission, surrender, obedience to the Creator. And the Creator is the same Creator. We call, according to the Quran or according to the Arabic language, we call God, Allah. And if you go back to the old books, and what was the language of Abraham, Moses, Jesus, was either the Hebrew, Aramaic, or Arabic. And Elohim, it is too close to the word Allah, Elohim, Allah, which is, that means the concept to call the Creator God in English, you don't find it in any tongue of any prophet. This kind of English, French language will never help people to come together and accept each other. But by using the word, the language which was used already during the old time by the old prophet, by the same prophet, which their religion was Islam, this will be, perhaps in the future, will be help understand them.
Okay, you were going to say, Imam.
Okay, thank you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. First, I'd like to give the definition, or the right definition of the word Islam. The word Islam means complete submission to the will of God, Allah. It means entire obedience to the Creator of the whole universe. And in relation to what Brother Fathy said, the chain of all religions is one. Namely, the source of all heavenly religions is one. Logically speaking, if we believe in one God, who is called, the proper name of God is Allah, Allah sent all the previous prophets and messengers. And He sent them revelations, sent down to them revelations, to these prophets and messengers. And Allah Himself sent His last messenger, Prophet Muhammad Salem Agwa, and made His message the everlasting message for all mankind. So, religion doesn't belong to the East or the West or to some people or some community. It does belong to Allah, to God, our own Creator. So some people misunderstand, and they say, you are Muslims, you are... Anyone who insults or attacks Islam or says something wrong about Islam, he's not attacking Muslims or individuals or some countries or some states. He's attacking or insulting his own Creator or her own Creator, God. You see? Because as I have just mentioned, religion does belong to Allah. And those who follow the religion, who behave according to its teachings, are called Muslims. That means they have submitted themselves entirely to the will of Allah, their own Creator. There is a proof in the glorious Quran. There is a verse in the glorious Quran which Allah says, Amin Rasul means the messenger of Allah. Of course, the Quran is revealed in Arabic. Believed, the messenger of Allah believed in what he received from Allah as a revelation. And all the believers, I mean Muslims, all of them believe in Allah, His angels, His scriptures, His messengers. They do not distinguish one of them from another or prefer one of them to another. And all they should say, O Allah, O God, we hear and we obey. See, that is the relationship between Islam and other religions. So we as Muslims, it is not out of our own choice. We are commanded to believe in all the previous prophets and messengers. We must believe in them. And if you like to read the true history, all these prophets and messengers, you can read in the glorious Quran. Why does Allah mention their stories in detail? Because, yes, they are the same. They are His own prophets, His own messengers. So if any Muslim does not believe or deny the prophethood of any one of them, he is a disobedient. You see, and if he dies like that, he is died as an unbeliever. He will be punished for that. So we must respect all of them. We must honor them. And we must believe that they are the messengers of Allah, came with revelation. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent them for temporal time, or for a specific community or a specific nation. But since the revelation came down to Prophet Muhammad, all mankind, the whole world, is responsible for this religion. It is a universal religion. Yes, you see, of course, what the churches, the synagogues we see around here or there or any other country, they are signs that these people are religious, yes, and they worship God. But they do not, and I respect them, but they do not worship God in the way He likes.
The way God likes.
You see, yes. So we must first think about that. For example, what is the last revelation? Came to all mankind. It's a glorious Quran. And it was revealed in Arabic. It is a challenge for Arabic-speaking people. Let anyone, you have thousands of professors who got their PhDs in Arabic language. Let them invent one single verse like the glorious Quran. Why? It is the word of Allah. No one can imitate it.
All right, then that would be something that we should, again, that does see a connection between not only the monotheistic religion, but even other spiritual teachings on a world scale, and puts them into an idea of an understanding that there is a larger spiritual force in the universe that we must be attendant to. I mean, and so that's something that we should understand. It's in keeping with those things. Islam, that's perhaps a misunderstanding, but I wonder, maybe you could address it, if you could. I mean, if you look at the modern world and you look at modernism, there seems to be a tendency in the mind of many, particularly a lot of the intellectuals. You had Sartre, and you had Kierkegaard, and you had the Death of God movement, and you've had a secular movement toward materialistic and secular values. You had Marxism and a dialectical and a decreased scientific understanding of the world that has set many people aside into a Western secular or a Western secular mode of thought, which is thought of in the minds of many as being the heart and soul of modernism, and that religion, all of it, whether it's Islam, Christian, Judaism, it's all just pagan belief from the past when people didn't have good, clear scientific understanding and secular understanding of the world in humanist terms, and we don't need all of those myths and things from the past, and that the modern world is secular oriented, and that's the dividing line. Do you think, or maybe you can address some of those issues?
Well, those are very, very profound issues that you raised, and I think it is part of a litany of the history of the evolution of science and the triumphant worship of science to the denigration of the concept of religion and God. There is a particular area that I'm very much concerned about, and my co-panelists have very aptly articulated the issue about Islam and religion. One of my primary concerns has to do, of course, is with one of the issues that you mentioned, and that has to do with representation and misrepresentation. As you know, recently Channel 13 just aired a series of programs on Islam and terrorism and fundamentalism and representing these terms, these what I consider and what literary critics call signified terms and post-structuralists call signified terms that in fact have particular kinds of inferred meaning, but in fact at the same time misrepresent the actual definition of what the religion and Islam really teaches.
That's a large part of just propaganda.
Propaganda. It manifests itself through the media and in the public sphere as propaganda. And one of the things I think is very, very important that is how Islam is represented in the public sphere. particularly through the media, which is one of the most powerful tools of communication.
Yeah.
And as Fathy Hegazy talked about the idea of the chasm between the East-West chasm between Islam and the West, which probably evolved in the 7th century on up through the Crusades, up into the Arab-Israeli conflict in the Near East, and which probably culminates in the Iranian Revolution. Mm-hmm. There is a tremendous amount of tension between East and the West. And what I constantly see in television programs is that they very rarely have or present views by scholars or analysts who have much more of an objective perspective on Islam. So they continue to mythologize Islamic teachings and ideology. And one of the things that I think is very, very detrimental to Islam is that the media tends to take 1,400 years of practice of cultures, various languages. The diversity within the Islamic community is such that there are hundreds of different languages and cultural practices, and the media is able to take these 1,400 years of practice and diversity and kind of make it a monolithic group and present it as a three-minute soundbite, and that does a tremendous disservice to Islam, and doesn't really represent or express the multivariate perspectives and opinions of the total Muslim community. We're talking about a community that represents 1 billion people, almost 1/5 of the world's population.
That's right.
In some way follows the teachings of al-Islam. So the Western media has done a very poor job in representing.
But what
that,
about the underlying?
imagery.
What about the underlying question of the whole existential movement and the whole thrust of Western intellectual thought, which has tended, despite the fact that Cornel West and others will tell us that, you know, church religion attendance is up and so forth, but we see a secular-oriented Western model that has been consistently since the Renaissance almost, and certainly into the scientific modern era, has been, and progress, human progress, has been associated with secular scientific developments, and that many people have said that we must get away from the religious past and, you know, to pave our way existentially in this universe as humanists apart from these transcendent kind of views. You don't think that is that a trend in the West that sets, and they're fearful of theocracy that
Yes.
they have had in the past and suffered under, whether they suffered under the rabbis or the Inquisition or other religious intolerances that they associate in the mind of a secular-oriented West. They don't want theocracy, and Islam represents, as far as they can see, the only viable possible movement in the world that could establish theocracy as a basis by which a state or a people will organize itself.
Exactly, and
Okay,
I
is
think
it a
you hit
problem?
it. Yes, you hit
Is
it
that
right
a
on the
major
head. I think you hit it
division?
right on the head, and we talked about this earlier. The idea that the Western world and society has evolved in their minds from a theocratic perspective as it relates to politics and governance. And as they view the Islamic resurgence as a move backwards in
Yes.
time, as opposed to a forward step into modernity.
That would be a lot of the intellectuals.
Exactly.
Right.
And the problem becomes when people from outside view Islam, they view it from somewhat of a Eurocentric perspective, not viewing Islam within its own intertextual perspectives, analysis, and exegetical and eschatological analysis. Right. So there's a tremendous amount of misunderstanding. We have to really deal with this from the Western mind and the Western perspective, and then from the Islamic mind and the Islamic perspective, because those are very, very key issues. And we talked about the movement, the film that Erickson did, and it very clearly is just propagandizes, sensationalizes, and tries to represent all this vast Muslim body as being anti-modern, anti-Western, anti-democratic, and terrorists.
Yes, and
So
outside of that, they're fine.
Exactly. So these terms, and he makes a disclaimer in the beginning of his speech, but it's just a small statement. But in any, he could have just gone to various universities and gotten a number of scholars who would have given a much better rational critique of the Islamic resurgence and Islamic movement and Islamic religion that would have given the Western people and the people who viewed that program a much better balanced view
And I
of what
would
Islam
say,
is about.
if I may, that the opening critique where he, in a certain sense, tried to disassociate his program by saying that most of the Muslim people of the world are not terrorists.
Right.
But he didn't necessarily disassociate him from the idea of saying that Muslim or the Muslim world is anti-modernist, anti-technological advancement. He did, from that perspective, if you understand what I'm saying, because but then they go ahead and try to make the case that they are, in a sense, terrorists. But you'd see this as the major thing, is a secular-oriented kind of dialectic between a secular-oriented, materialistic world and one that has a stronger spiritual component to the way in which the people form their Weltanschauung, or the zeitgeist of the thing is a more spiritually based one. And I don't know if it might be that there are, you do a lot of ecumenical things with Christian, Judaic people and others.
Oh, excuse me, I'd like to ask you a question about that.
Sir.
Do they hate religion itself or hate some individuals? Are they against religion or individuals or communities?
I'm sorry.
That's the point.
The modernist mind?
No, I mean generally, American in particular and all the people in general. Are they against Islam as a religion or against Muslims as individuals? As you think, as you see.
Well, I don't know. I hadn't thought. Have you asked me questions? I'm not sure. I think that they've been so propagandized, it seems to me, as he suggests, by not only Erickson's film, but just a whole series of images that go back, and there's been manipulation and disinformation that's been put out and so forth for various reasons. I think at both levels, it seems to me the vast amount of the vast percentage of the American people are just hopelessly prejudiced when it comes to that, because they really haven't had very much else in the media that they've been able to repair to. And I'm afraid they have a great deal of problems just psychologically and sociologically within their own society. There is a problem of moral values that are eroding in the West in many cases. Many of their secular-oriented ways of getting a sense of identity and so forth are not working well economically and otherwise. There's a tremendous dissatisfaction and anger, and people begin to start looking for scapegoats when they're feeling a sense of something lacking within themselves. Some will perhaps go try to do
attack others.
Yeah, they will attack others, and I think Islam has been picked out now that the Soviet Union no longer is there. That Islam has been picked out in the minds of many as one block of humanity that can be set up as a scapegoat. I don't know. I don't know. You gentlemen are, if we look around, if I may, we look around the world. We got Bosnia, where there was just a humiliating, the UN has completely failed and the West has failed. They haven't lived up to it. Muslims have been terribly persecuted. Some people certainly see that thing, what's going on in Palestine, as a long-running question of justice. There's Kashmir. There's other places where the injustice goes on against the Islamic people. And you're aware of this, but the American people probably tend not to be nearly to the degree that they should be. I don't know.
I mean, from the point of view of Muslims are not terrorists, but the other are terrorists, because the other are against Islam or at the understanding, or at the same time they are practicing their attack all over or many areas in the world against Muslims. Now, who can say that the Muslims are terrorists? Sometimes the Muslim, perhaps, in some case, they are defending themselves. But, if you go by the teaching of the Quran itself, Muslims don't have to exceed, only they have to defend themselves. But they have to stop until this point. But I don't see that around all the world that non-Muslim are doing the same. Non-Muslim, they take advantage from their own country, from this kind of freedom to attack others, to put hate. I mean, we cannot call this freedom by just attacking other people's faith or other people's culture. It's destruction.
It's
destruction.
It goes on. It goes on, and it's a situation that is part of the modern experience. I don't know what we're to think of it, because it goes on in all parts of the world, and it's something that certainly should be rectified. And of course, that's what we're trying to do here, in a certain sense, is to bring a different perspective to things, and to get past some of the scapegoating that is taking place.
Actually, you have raised a very important question, really, concerning what's happening to Muslims in Bosnia or in Kashmir. Again, it is not the fault of religion. It is the fault of the religious or the Muslim people. Maybe they lack some spiritual values, or they do not adhere closely to the teaching of the religion. Maybe because of that, Allah, of course, is trying them, and later on they will be distinguished and they will be good Muslims. But still, it is the responsibility of the whole world. For example, if we read a verse in the glorious Quran, I'll give you the meaning in English, but the Quran, of course, was, as I said, was revealed in Arabic. Allah says, ye mankind, we have created you male and female, and made you different tribes, different countries, different states, just to know, to learn, that the best of you in the sight of Allah, in the sight of God, is he or she who fears him most. That means all mankind must work together, regardless of this religion. Be as you are. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says there is no compulsion in religion. It be no compulsion in religion. The right path is quite obvious and the wrong path is quite obvious. Go ahead, it's up to you. But as human beings, we have to live in peace. We have to have mutual respect and mutual love. And we have to side each other. If you are not my brother in Islam, you are my brother in humanity. The whole world belongs to one family, Adam and Eve. And Allah is giving us, all of us. We are living together in one country. It is the land of Allah, God. And we are living together. And we have blood relations. For example, the American people, most of them, are the grandfathers and the grandmothers of Muslim children, Muslim kids. And on the other hand, also, we have some Americans who have married Muslim women. So the whole world is one family. And we must stand, we must support all those who are in a weak position, like the people. Let them be human beings, regardless of their religion. We have to support them. The whole world must stand on their side. We are against the violation of human rights.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Yeah. And this is an important part of it.
Yes, and according to the teachings of all the religions, all the if they have a sense of spiritual touch or sense of religion, we must know that all the religions invite people to do that.
Well, they would invite them in the best teachings of the religion. Sometimes it's more honored in the breach, I'm afraid, very often, you know. But you had Malcolm X, who was a towering figure, who was so taken with the fact. Another thing is that in Islam, they seem to be more effective at having been able to supersede racism, which is one of the principal problems confronting mankind. And that's something that, again, is perhaps not well enough understood. Malcolm understood it. He underlined it in the autobiography and other places, that they superseded racism, and it's the only one that has, because racism and ethnic cleansing and ethnic identity is something that seems to be tearing so much of the human society apart. And one overriding force that seems to override Islam. That's very important. And Malcolm made that point.
I think that's a very important point. I think when you talk about the idea of conflict, and you talk about the quote-unquote titles and terms that denigrate and identify people negatively and marginalize people like fundamentalists, terrorists, these terms are used as political tools to demonize people.
Absolutely.
For political and cultural dominance and hegemony. Right. And as the Imam talked about, it would not be fair and just for us to say that there are not Arab people who are disgruntled, who have attacked and in many instances reacted indiscriminately in harming innocent people, and that is totally against the teachings of Islam. There must be a clear distinction between the lofty teachings of Islam and the practices of individual Muslims who are people.
Sometimes following cultural traits that
Exactly.
aren't Islamic.
Exactly. And again, when we talk about something, we're talking about this issue of representation. Whenever something happens in the media, where, for example, a Christian commits a crime, we don't say a Christian person committed the crime. But every time something happens with Arabs or Muslims, it's always an Islamic terrorist. It is something that denigrates the great tradition of 1,400 years of practice of culture and art and civilization, denigrated by a particular term. And I think we as Muslims are very much concerned about this. And as we mentioned before, I'm very optimistic because there's a tremendous amount of interfaith, interreligious dialogue going on a regular basis throughout the United States. And I mentioned to you before, I just came back from a conference at the Vatican, and where 1,000 delegates from all the religious faiths came together to talk about the issue of world peace and extreme poverty and underemployment and the terrible state of human misery that exists in this world. So as Muslims, we are trying to take a proactive approach to addressing the misrepresentation that happens in the media, and at the same time trying to teach American people that they have nothing to fear from Muslims. And you will find that the majority of Muslims in the world are just despise the acts, the dastardly acts that are committed and where innocent people are victimized and harmed. That is something that we despise as Muslims, because we know that Islam does not substantiate that.
But at the same time, you would despise the injustices that do exist.
Exactly.
And you don't want peace by submitting to injustice
and
as a way of life.
And this is another thing, back to the whole issue of Erickson and the representation that he did on Channel 13. The problem is when you take and put paste-ups and put words and pictures on screen and don't have an opportunity to have the people themselves express themselves or explain their positions, then you decontextualize the discourse.
This sometimes is done unconsciously.
Sometimes consciously, and sometimes unconsciously. And then people are not able to explain their positions, and because you don't understand them within context, you don't understand the identifiable genesis of rage. Many of Arabs have rage because, who would not have rage when someone comes in your land and takes your home?
Yeah,
so
and that expression of rage is just associated with terrorism.
Exactly. So that rage is one...
Terrorism is the rage of the ones who are weak.
Exactly. So anybody who lives in occupied lands where there's a strong military force subjecting them, subjugating them, marginalizing them, oppressing them, then they are going to take actions that may not necessarily be as ideal and as pristine as we would have it as observers.
Yeah, right, exactly.
As civilized observers in the modern world. We would say, well, but then in many other instances we'd have to, and one of this important thing
is... There's going to be variety between the people, the way they will react to the injustice.
People react differently.
Some acting out.
Some are more acting out. Some are more deal with it in terms of violence. Some deal with it in terms of the word.
Some
and
people
what they call
internalize
the
it.
rhetoric of the.
Some people the oppressor wants them to internalize it and take it in and become self-hating.
Right, and some people do it.
That happens too.
Some people do it through the rhetoric of resistance, just in talk and speaking out against the injustices.
Right.
But the Islam, what is important, I think, for the American public to understand is Islam has a prescription of how we are to conduct ourselves in every aspect of life.
Yes.
In cases of war, in marriage, in divorce, in family life. So whenever Muslims, who are individual human beings, act outside of the realm of those practices and teachings, then they are acting within their own selves individually. They are taking actions that are outside the pale of Islam. So we, in other words, do not want the American people to understand, to glean from these images that, okay, this action is Islamic, when in fact the action is not Islamic. It is the action of a disgruntled Muslim. And there must be a distinction made in order for us to be represented.
But there also must be made, in some way, it seems to me, like, doesn't there, if there is injustice, and there has to be, peace can be bought by just submitting to injustice. If the slave submits to the slave master, let's just say, there will be peace because there's no reaction. So if there is injustice, there must be some sort of struggle, and people should understand this word jihad, which is so misunderstood in the West. They take it and associate it with war and violence, but jihad is really a struggle against, and it's often just if I understand it, maybe you can clear it up for us, Imam, but it's a struggle spiritually and individually and other kinds of aspects to it as well. But you don't want to buy peace at the acceptance of injustice. And those who are struggling against injustice should not be able to just, in a carte blanche way, all be called terrorist. Anyone who does not accept the injustices that are being imposed upon a people. But maybe you could address this idea of what do they call
Thank you. This is a
jihad?
very good question, by the way. Really, the word jihad, it has different meanings, different interpretations. For example, what we ourselves, sometimes, for example, when we abstain from doing some evil actions, this is called jihad in Islam. For example, I have the desire to commit a theft, to steal, because I need some money. This brother is very rich, and I'd like to steal some from him. So I make jihad against myself. No, I remind myself now and then, no, the religion is against that, and Allah, God says so and so you must not steal. So there is spiritual, there is dialogue inside, innate myself, inside myself, between good and evil, to do this or not to do it. You see, this is called jihad.
Yes, right.
See, jihad against your lower desires, jihad against your physical wants. For example, you have some poor people around you, and you'd like to give them. Your family may prevent you from doing that, discourage you. Don't give them. We need this money. Maybe you die in the near future, and we need this money for ourselves. Don't give them. And you insist to give. No, I have to give charity. This is for my own salvation in the hereafter. So I have to give a charity. You are making jihad against your family, against your own children.
I see. Right.
Sometimes your family, they don't like you to go to church or to the synagogue to worship God. No, stay with us. Let us enjoy enjoy sitting with you. Don't go to the church. No, I must go to worship God. I have to dedicate some time to worship God. Then you are making jihad also.
So jihad is really a spiritual battle very often, and
it's a spiritual. And then
struggle.
Concerning struggle, yes. Concerning war, if there is, for example, Allah says, وَقَاتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ الَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَكُمْ, fight against those who fight you. وَلَا تَعْتَدُوا, and start not hostility. Don't start fighting, because Allah loves not those who transgress His bounds.
But He does love those who defend for the
defend. You must defend because Allah. Yes,
important.
Allah
so the idea of equity is very important.
As a human being, Allah respects your dignity. For example, you are not Muslim.
No.
Yes. If I am a Muslim, if I backbite you, I say something wrong about you in your absence, Allah will punish me for that, because Allah respects your dignity as a human. You are one of His creatures. You see? And this is considered for me as backbiting. And I'm a Muslim, I'll be punished if I don't repent to Allah, to God, and ask you to forgive me. This is again, it will be against me on the day of judgment. Allah will punish me for that.
On the day of
so what else? Yes. I consider also, for example, if I do something wrong, if you are my neighbor and you are in need, you are not Muslim, and you are in need, you are poor and you have a big family, and I'm a rich man. If I don't give you, in the eyes of Allah, the eyes of God, from the Islamic perspective, I am a sinner, and Allah will punish me for that. Why don't you give him? He is your neighbor, and he has a right. You see, and this is, I have to shoulder this responsibility, and this is mentioned in the glorious Quran. So this, by doing that, I am considered as a true Muslim. So why does Allah respects even by the mere word. If I say this will not affect your life, I say, Brother Hegazy, this brother is not good and he's very stingy. Just I am talkative, just mere words. These mere words in the eyes of Allah are a sin. I'll be punished. So suppose if I come to slap your face, what happens? Does God don't give him your other? No, you must defend yourself.
Okay.
Allah commands you to do that.
If you are attacked.
Yes, if you are attacked.
Equity, right?
If you are
Equity and
attacked,
justice.
don't say, okay, I have to be humble. No, you have to defend yourself. So Islam against oppression,
and
you see, against violation of human rights, against injustice. You see? Yes, we must have equality. We must spread freedom. That's why fighting is important in some cases.
Do you think that the world in which we live now, as we talk on December 1, 1994, is structured, spaceship Earth, with the international system of economics, and the wall has come down against Soviet Union, and the world as it's functioning now, we have the haves and the have-nots of the world? Do you think the world is structured in a just way? Do we think that the world is structured in a way that the trendings of the world are going to create a just order for everyone in an equitable way, which would be in keeping with the spirit of Islam? Or do you think there need to be major changes or transformations or paradigm shifts, in the word of modernist and fancy terminology, and so paradigm shift in terms of the way it operates? Do we need to have major changes in terms of the way things are? Or can the power systems that exist and the power relationships that exist between the people of the world continue as they are now, or must there be changes?
Well, that's
what do you think?
That's a very, very, very...
and does Islam represent a force for change to those status quo power holders who... a couple questions.
Well, let us say this. I think that in reviewing the Islamic projects that exist in various countries, the Muslims are going to be faced with a challenge. And that challenge is going to be to structure and set up an egalitarian society that recognizes and respects the rights of everyone. Islam, now, let me say what I'm saying. Islam teaches this.
Yes, right.
The practice of individuals when they come to power is going to be the challenge that Muslims are going to have to deal with.
Okay,
so,
but it's heartfelt among the Ummah.
Yes, and this is part of the quest and part of, I think, the center of the Islamic resurgent movement. The Islamic resurgence, unlike the way it has been depicted in Western perspective, Western media, is part of a quest to establish justice and civility and order in societies where the Muslims are subjected to oppression and totalitarian regimes.
And do they project this out to a world? And they would like to see a world of justice.
Exactly. This is part of the global worldview of the Muslims, that they would like to see this on a global level.
They want a world of universal justice, and we live in a world, President Carter said it, of universal injustice.
Exactly.
So there's a conflict.
Definitely there's a conflict.
And Islam is a potential force for change that some people may want to demonize and scapegoat, because it is
represents that change and represents a threat.
Change in the world.
In many instances, it represents. Yes, it represents.
People are against Islam.
Exactly. Let me say this. Let me say this. And as a matter of fact, that represents part and parcel of one of the major tensions that exists. Because there are people who want to maintain the status quo, and they recognize that Islam is a force that will challenge that status quo in its quest to establish balance and social and political justice. Now, as Foucault has very aptly articulated in his book In Truth and Power and Knowledge, the American society has benefited, American political force, let us say, has benefited from a demonized Islam.
Oh, absolutely.
To the extent that it serves the purpose of many aspects and aspirations of U.S. foreign policy. Recently in the Foreign Affairs, one of the, Samuel Huntington, one of the Harvard ex-Harvard professors who basically has a tremendous input in shaping and formulating U.S. foreign policy, couched this term, the clash of civilizations, where he projected in the future that there will be clashes, where Muslims will clash with Western society, and there will be alignments and realignments in various, what he called fault lines. And Fukuyama has talked about this issue also. Now, the reality is that this what we call the regime of truth, this media, print media and academia, in the Near Eastern Studies programs in universities, published books, have all too often demonized Islam.
Oh, absolutely.
For the benefit of the U.S. foreign policy, because the U.S. foreign policy in many instances has not reflected the democratic egalitarian ideals that it espouses within its own borders. And in many instances that is a problematic, particularly as it relates to its minorities and its racism and its ethnocentricity.
And as they grow scientifically successful, and as the economic consequences of automation, other kinds of injustices grow, they're downsizing. The way things are going, the materialistic, secular-oriented patterns by which they've been able to, let's use a loaded term, materialistically buy off the conscience of the broader society, are not working.
Right.
And the citizens are beginning to get restive. They've expressed it politically, and there is likely to get worse. You know, in the way, if you understand what I'm saying. So, and and they're so bought into materialistic, secular values to get a sense of identity.
Exactly.
You know? So Islam is one force in the world where there is a spiritual basis of that is very strong.
Right.
And that is a threat to, I mean, it's seen that way. We're trying to understand the irrationality of the attack upon Islam, and it may be rooted in the fact that at a spiritual, intellectual level, not necessarily arms, but at a spiritual, intellectual level, it's a potential force to an unjust status quo that the people who run the status quo don't yet have a way or a vision of how they're going to be able to operate things in a just way. And it's the problem with the people who are running this spaceship Earth. They ought to get their, you know, some sort of an equitable system worked out that they haven't done yet. I mean, if you understand what I'm saying.
Exactly. And there's a particular experience, for example, yes, a particular instance is indicative of what you're talking about, is particularly the project in Algeria. And Erickson also had a picture of Ghanouchi in the film in Channel 13. He was one of the leading proponents of the Islamic movement there in calling for an Islamic parliamentary system in Algeria, not calling for a totalitarian regime, was voted by the majority of the people in Algeria. 87% of the people in Algeria supported the Islamic Party there. So now, why is it that America, who espouses democracy and democratic ideals and freedom and justice and voting, did not support that particular project? Okay,
let me put a couple of propositions to you. The reason they'll do it because they say there is a principle of separation. Let me put two to you, I think, that resonate to the prejudices of the American public. One is there must be separation of church and state. Okay? We have that almost as a religious principle. I mean, we don't have a religious underpinning to our governmental system, and we accept the Constitutional Convention, the Founding Fathers, and the Constitution, and these secular processes almost with religious fervor. True. And instead of defending angels on the end of a pin, we have lawyers on the end of an amendment.
Yes,
and they have this kind of a division of secular, a division of church and state, which is something that Americans buy, and they're fearful of that. The other thing, let me just put that forth. This is a principle that is accepted by America.
Which we don't have it.
No, you have just said the spiritual force of Islam. Islam is a comprehensive way of life, a complete code of life. See? It is not just teach Islam, we do not have what's called separation between church and religion.
Well, I'm suggesting that's why.
Religion includes, of course, politics, economics, social life, everything is included. Allah teaches us to do everything in the glorious Quran. How to deal with our families, how to deal with our neighbors, how to deal with our fellow men or fellow teachers, how to prepare ourselves for the hereafter, for the life to come.
And this world also. And
it
brings a code of ethics into human behavior.
Everything is mentioned in detail.
Maybe some people who would like to separate out those religious traditions and those ethical traditions from the everyday secular world.
Social, economic,
Perhaps.
religious,
I don't know.
you see, and political aspects are all dealt with. The glorious Quran are the sayings of the Prophet, which are also revelation, came to him from Allah also. That's why Allah says, we have revealed the glorious Quran unto thee as an exposition of all things. You see?
Well, that's
guidance and mercy with the glad tidings for all Muslims.
Yeah, but that's again if you're a man of faith and you accept it. If you don't accept it, if you accept it only as something that somebody really went up and had a vision, or like William Blake, or something, and it's nothing divine. If you don't accept that, then you're in a different
Yes, exactly. This is the main problem.
That's a clash in the world.
This is the main problem of most of the, not only American, Western people, because we have a great mass of the American people who have really understood Islam, and we have a very good relationship amongst each other. Of course, we are neighbors and we are brothers, as I said, in humanity. You see, but those who try, as brother have just mentioned, to belittle the religion of Islam, or to demonize, or to say, or to attack or insult Islam or Muslims, they are completely ignorant, see, about the religion of Islam. Let us, as I admire one of the American critics, is called Matthew Arnold. He said in one of his books, Essays in Criticism, he says, we have to see the object as in itself it really is. To be an objective critic, you must see the object as in itself it really is, and not as it should be.
Or as it is prejudicially seen.
You see, yes.
Yeah.
So we have, yes, read about Islam.
Well, that's what we're trying to do
judge,
here.
Don't judge Islam from the perspective of individuals.
Yeah.
Suppose I'm a Muslim,
Much
but I'm not practicing.
propagandizing against it.
Suppose I'm a
Watch
Muslim.
it.
I am a Muslim, but I'm not practicing my religion.
Yeah.
So am I the touchstone or the measurement to this religion? Do I a real representative of this religion? No. So read what is this religion. Read carefully and intensively. What are the essence of this religion? Is it a true religion or not? You see?
Yeah.
And these teachings, what are they heavenly teachings or just some philosophy bought by some?
Well, is this not one of the clashes of the modern world?
Yes.
Are these heavenly is there such a thing? God is dead. Yes. There's no such thing as God. What is that nonsense? That's something from out of the cave.
But see now, again,
let's... God? There's no God.
Well, let's say... Well,
God is dead. Didn't Barth tell us that? Didn't Kierkegaard tell us that?
Right, but
didn't Sartre with the cigarettes and the Gauloises tell us that God is dead? And doesn't every secular, smart modernist know that God is dead and there's no God?
But there's another point now.
But
there's another point that you have to take into consideration. Of course, when we're talking about America, we're talking about now, particularly this particular junction in American history, that the emergence, the re-emergence after a number of years, decades, of the Republican Party and the quest for putting prayer back into schools, moving into a moral authority. So there are, the relationship between, the separation between church and state in America is already a precarious and nebulous concept that is problematic even within American society because it has its own tension. And now, as you were saying before, when you talk about the project in Algeria, the issue becomes, well, Americans see that as being part of a theocratic move by the Algerian people. But now the question becomes, do and should American people be the determining factors as to how other people set up their political systems and structures? If, in fact, the people in Algeria decide and determine that part of their own self-determination as a people want to set up the Islamic project and to set up a model of an Islamic civilization, Islamic society, then they should have the freedom and power to do that as an independent sovereign nation. Now, now the problem, but the realpolitik world has to do with the fact that of the fears and apprehensions of Western civilization as it relates to how that project will manifest. And it's not all negative, mind you. I don't want to just take the other opposite view and just demonize everything Western or American. No. Because there are some Americans in policy and the State Department who are saying, well, and in academia who are concerned about how that project will manifest itself. Will, in fact, the Muslims, after they take over power, in fact, in Algeria, in Egypt and other places, will they in fact oppress the non-Muslim minorities in their countries? Will they in fact oppress the people who are determined that they want to live a certain Western influenced lifestyle? And in the model that the only model they can draw from in many instances has to do with Iran, and the reporting out of Iran has been somewhat negative. I mean, there's been a serious demonization of Iran in respect to its whole Islamic project, and after Khomeini took over, so the Western society has no real model, and the Muslims are saying, well, these are our countries, we want to establish this model, and let us establish our model and be judged in accordance with our own religion and tradition. But there's a bigger question in my mind as an analyst and a budding scholar. The bigger question and challenge to my mind...
Keep budding and budding. It just gets more and more to learn all the time.
The question becomes, in my mind, the question and the real challenge that Muslims have to deal with is the postmodern technology and the advancement of what we consider quote-unquote civilization. Because the issue is more so now than a nation-state and the issues of nation-states and global structure and order. It has to do with Western cultural hegemony that is now impacting upon countries like in Egypt, where now young people have been titillated by the attractiveness of what we consider modernity and postmodern ideas, dress, culture, music, film, language, and all of these things. So now many of the Muslims who are in the quest to establish Islamic states are saying, we have to stop this because it's ruining our moral and ethical fiber and it's destroying our societal values. So a lot of this struggle has to do not so much with anti-America, so to speak.
Anti-modernism.
Anti-modernism.
Yeah, right.
So
well, it goes both ways, bro.
Yeah, and then the great scholar Sayyid Qutb said years ago, he said, well, the Muslim scholars have the responsibility of evaluating and analyzing modernity and sifting those things that are are detrimental to the growth and development of the moral fiber of Islamic civilization society, discarding those things and taking those things from modernity and postmodernism that are beneficial for the Muslim community. This is a project that is yet to be done and is going to have to take place.
That's the human project for now.
And in America, it's the same situation, the same question.
And we're all in the same boat in a certain sense because we have these overriding and materialistic things, and then we have these spiritual traditions, and we have to bring the two together in order to find some sort of a way that can synergistically allow for there to be justice to find its way onto this planet, and the full application and utilization of the human spirit for everybody has to be manifest. Injustices cannot be permitted, and we need a way to bridge modernity and the spiritual traditions that we need. And this is the major challenge.
To create some balance between, yes.
We need to create a balance, we should, here in the West, should stop this incessant scapegoating, it seems to me, of the Islamic expression of that, which is a major force of mankind, potentially seen and threatening to. I don't know whether it was tied into Zionist dehumanizing of the Arab and Islam, or from whence it came. But we should cease and desist on this, and we should begin to see that as the spiritual contributions and equity that it contributes to the dialogue. And I'm happy to see that you're having dialogue with others of the spiritual world, and those spiritual values should find their way into the human spirit, and equity should find its way, because runaway modernism is leading to a disastrous precipice toward which we must not go over, I think, don't you think?
Definitely. I agree with you 100%.
Well, I don't know. This is and Islam represents a major force. Those are some of the things, but it does seem to be, if I may just sort of in a sense recollect or recapitulate here, is that this modernism theme is one that is really one of the major divisions that many people see between. They see Islam as retrogressive, as being going back to religious roots as we had, with our religious roots that we escaped from, and that this is something that has to be understood, and that the spiritual values have to somehow find their way into the modern world. And there's signs that that is maybe beginning to happen in a full, even humanistic sense. That's beginning to find its way in the questions of increasing numbers of people who are trying to find spiritual values as the institutions of materialism and modern secular West begin to crumble. People are looking for spiritual or transcendent values now.
Very
in
true.
the West, don't you think?
Yes, very, very true.
Do you think maybe that's why there's so many people who are going to Islam?
Exactly.
Because that's one integral source of spiritual values.
That's very true. People are really searching for wholeness, searching for a spiritual path that will enable them to deal with the challenges of modernity.
Right.
I mean, it's very difficult.
I guess that's confronting us all.
It is.
Well, listen, I don't know. I think, one thing, yes, Fathy. Yes, we're old friends, yes. We only have 30 seconds or so left.
No, just let me just say like this, that the Quran, when it speaks for all human beings, for all people.
Okay.
That's it.
That's it? Yeah. Okay. That's one way to look at it. It's like Bucky Fuller used to say, it's a priori mysterious mind. Okay, listen, we could go on talking. It's a big subject, and it's one that needs to be addressed in big terms because there's so much propaganda directed against it. But if I may, I'd like to just say on my immediate left is Fathy Hegazy, who again is with the Islamic and World Peace Association, and on my immediate second left is Dr. Muhammed Agwa. He's a PhD associated with the Al-Azhar University in Cairo, and is imam and director of the Islamic Cultural Center here in New York. And on my far left is Brother Amir AlIslam, who is with the Medgar Evers College in Brooklyn, New York. Happy to have been able to bring you those perceptions. We've tried to address the Emerson film and some other things. There should be more of this kind of programming going on, because these Islamic people have to be heard more clearly than they have to.
These Muslim people.
These Muslim people have to be heard more clearly than they have. Happy to bring that to you. We invite you to tune in. We'll be coming back in conversations again next week. Gentlemen, once again, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you very much.
See you next time.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So that should be, we'll just sit for just a minute or so.
Is it okay?
I think, I don't know how, I think we got it some, it's a big subject.
It is.